everyone, and welcome back to the CLSR. And I'm your host, the counselor. Just want to let you people know you can get a hold of me at TheCounselor That's the counselor at gmail.com. Now, I want to say to all my wonderful listeners out there, let's continue to spread the word like the wise old bird and put your money where your mouth is so we can handle this biz. Take care. Welcome to the CLSR, and I'm your host, the counselor. And I did do a podcast on police brutality here in Canada, which is really evident and unfortunate. I was focusing on the Indigenous plight, and it's true, it's happening, but it's also happening in the black community. Now, many of you, if not all of you, know of the George Floyd in the United States, where the officer had his knee on George Floyd and actually killed him. And the world just was appalled by this behavior. It was despicable, disgraceful, disrespectful, and demeaning and oppressive, which a lot of black folks like myself are used to a lot of foolishness like this. It's sad. It's been going on way too long, but it's real. It's what's happening. And a lot of you are sitting out there going, well, that happens in the United States. It's so violent, blah, blah, blah. But that's not really the truth. It doesn't just happen in the United States. It's happening here in Canada. Case in point, Montreal Police officer, what was it, June 17th, 2021. I think what had happened was a police officer were called to a school, apparently, a high school, and there was a fight with teens. And one of the police officers had one of the teens who was at the bus stop. Two officers, actually, were there. And these officers decided to put their neck on this 14-year-old, their knee on the 14-year-old's neck. Right? I mean, they didn't learn anything from the United States, but this is a procedure to put on the neck and the face of a 14-year-old teen. He wasn't struggling. He wasn't, being oppositional. He wasn't saying a word. They decided to arrest him, and their procedure was to put their knee on his face and his neck. And I'm not talking for a couple seconds. Okay, the first 15 seconds. Go to CBC News and look up Montreal police officer film kneeling on black teen's neck, prompting calls for an investigation, they say. Come on, they do that all the time. But my point is that if George Floyd was such a traumatic event that we should have learned about, why are the police still going on even over here like as if it never happened? And first of all, we don't need George Floyd's incident, but that should be a clear incident for even the police force in this country here to make some dramatic changes and to ensure that they're not operating with impunity, which they clearly are. And I have no hopes that there's going to be anything done about it because there never really is. But what's really got me upset is the fact that George Floyd was worldwide. Everyone saw it. But they're doing it here with this call themselves policing, which it's a menace to society, basically. It's abuse. It's abuse of power. It's terrible. It's despicable. And you know what? You haven't heard anything from the Prime Minister. You heard from maybe some MP saying, we'll look into it. Look into it? Really? Really? This is what I'm talking about this country. When we talk about democracy for who? A 14-year-old boy. Do you know what you're doing by doing stuff like that? You are showing that, you know what? This country isn't a country of freedom. This is a country of control. People say, oh, I'm happy, they're proud to be. Oh, yeah, you're living in your little communities. But the point being is that you see something like George Floyd and you go, wow, there's lessons to be learned there. There's got to be. But see, this is what I'm talking about when I talk about a systemic system that has this systemic racism and oppression just built into it, that they operate with impunity, as I mentioned earlier, and there's no consequences and no actions. Oh, there'll be a little bit of talk, but this is what you're doing. A 14-year-old, and you're doing that? Oh my goodness. You know what? Unfortunately, I have real bad feelings about the progress this country is going to make. If they keep making these mistakes and these horrible acts, and you wonder why, okay, we're in a community where the black community has issues with the police, okay, there's no excuse for that. Absolutely no excuse at all. You can't in any way give me any explanation as it being appropriate for you, an officer, to put your knee on the neck and face of a young black man. I'm so disgusted. I'm so appalled that it needs to be said that unfortunately there are a lot of people talking about the freedoms, but they're not talking about the oppression. They're not talking. In this country, you can't even say race. If you're in the education system and you say, oh, there's a race problem in there, it's denied. In politics, same thing. You can't really talk about it because if you are talking about it, you're considered the outsider. You're considered the opposition. You're the minority without a voice. And this is throughout, man. This is even in the foster care system, the children's aid system. I know, I worked in it. They view blacks as second-class citizens. Man, I've even had social workers call blacks second-class citizens. And when it was, spoken to, when it was addressed, the social worker that had made it, okay, Frank Healy, Catholic Children's Aid, he was the one calling blacks second-class citizens. And you know what? They did nothing about it, the Catholic Children's Aid Society in Toronto. It's disgraceful. Terrible. Disgraceful. And when it was brought to their attention, all they did was put it on the back burner and ignore it. They didn't care because it's part of their policy. Clearly. It's sad, but this is what I'm saying. When you've had institutional experiences, when you call them out, it doesn't really matter. So what do? We walk away from them, dealing with the same old garbage. That's what it is. And it's true. All right, this was years ago, but come on, what is happening even today? It doesn't really matter how long ago it is. Look what's happening. Look at the way we enforce. Look at what we're doing to our youth, and you wonder why half of them are running around out there. Look at how they're being treated. Calling blacks off the street, hey, you get over here. Like, that's not how you're supposed to talk to Canadian citizens. That's the problem. Policing, terrible. Montreal, shame on you. Shame on you as a city. You should be ashamed of yourself. You should be looking at yourselves and saying, you know what? And then the funny thing is one of their MPs was in the news talking about, oh, we don't have a race problem here. What is that? You don't have a race problem there? You got worse than a race problem. Okay, you got a recognition for respect problem. And that's the terrible truth of it, is that politicians sit up there and they talk their talk, but they don't walk the walk. They talk the talk, but they don't walk the walk. They'll deny, oh, we don't have no problems here. Well, because they're not looking for problems. They're looking to deflect. That's what it is. They look to deflect. And when you see acts like this, violence here, where that is violence. And the thing about it is, when you see something, that's a message that they're sending to the public. That's all it is. It's a message that they're sending to the public that that's acceptable. And if it wasn't on the news, it would be going on as it usually does. And the sad thing is there's no governing body that really does anything about it. It's despicable, disgraceful, and like I said, there's people that come to this country and they see some of these things and they fly in and they fly right out. And it's because the role that we play within our country is not a respectful role. It's not to be admired by other countries. And it's somebody said, oh, well, you know what, you're in this country, you need to love this country and respect this country. If you don't like it, go. If I don't like it, go where? If I don't like it, it's not anybody's country but the indigenous to tell anybody anything. But obviously, when you get into a country and you still operate this way, talking about rights human rights in this country, it's a joke. You can clearly see it's a joke. You ever see some of what the police are doing, even here in Toronto, playing that ghetto jungle music on there. Some of the kids that they arrest. It's ridiculous. It's sad. They don't want to hear it. They don't want to know the truth. See, when people were working in those areas, they know. But see, it doesn't matter, obviously. And that lesson was not learned by George Floyd, clearly. Right? It's a practice. It's oppression. How are you going to have community policing? Of course you don't have community policing. You don't even have community policing here in Toronto. Everyone knows the communities that need support and resources. Everybody does, but they don't have them. Go through there. Walk through there. It's garbage. And all people can say, oh, there's shootings, there's that. Of course. Because the problem is that you're not policing. You're not really doing community policing. That's all you're doing. It's not in your benefit to do any real community policing. It's just not. And because what do? You make the money off the criminals and you send them right back out there into those communities. And the people who live in those communities are afraid of the criminals that you send out there. Because they know you're going to let them in and out because it's a money-making system. It's not a criminal justice system that's justice. It's a money-making system. So you don't protect the people. You want community members. You're dealing with gangs, okay? And you're dealing with drugs. And if we're really honest about it, if you go into these areas, it doesn't take longer than 5 minutes to know that half these drugs going in there are coming from north. They're coming from the northern area where the wealthy are, and they have them, and they distribute it to these bad neighborhoods, and they sell them amongst each other, and then they fight. The organized crime is running rampant. They went from Montreal, then they come over here, and they get all these brothers fighting and shooting and killing each other over this money. There's big money in it. There's a whole process that's going on that people just don't want to really know about. But they want to point fingers. Oh, look at they're violent, and this is what's going on. Oh, yeah. We know what's happening. We know exactly what's happening, but guess what? It's going to continue to happen just as it has been. Because you know what? You want community to work with you, but them babies, black babies are being shot through windows and all this foolishness. All this stuff is going on. Oh, let's lock them down until we can get them appealed to get them out again. And then when we send them back in them communities to make it worse for those wonderful people. I worked in those neighborhoods. I know there's wonderful people in those neighborhoods, but a lot of them are scared. They won't even have their kids go out after dark. They make sure that their kids are in because you know what? They don't want to have anything happen to their children. And why is that? Well, that's because the system, okay, is not trying to do anything but incarcerate and agitate. And this is an example. If there is a confrontation, this example right here with this Montreal police officer kneeling on the black teen's, not just his neck, his face. If you're doing that, what do you want? What do you expect to come out of that? Clearly, it's oppression. What do you expect is going to happen to that culture, that race that's trying to live a life, even if they have an altercation and you don't find out and that's how you arrest? Come on, there's too many issues and there's not enough understanding going on. And I wish there was more advocacy and understanding and people who really did do something about it. Oh, you could write your books, publish your articles. It doesn't matter. They don't want to know about it. And that's the problem. And that's why I'm saying when you see incidents, clearly it's on video. You can see it yourself. You don't got to read anything. You can see this going down in this democracy. Canada, right? You can see, they haven't learned anything, right? And then just the other day I told you about officer accusing a young black man of not paying the bus fare. What does he do? He goes on the bus and asserts his aggression by pushing this man, hitting him in his throat, knocking him back into a seat. They're a judge and jury, and it's sad. You're enforcers. That's the problem. And you're wondering where this frustration is coming from and why the community doesn't trust the police. Oh, and these judges or justices of the peace, half of whom aren't really lawyers, don't know the law, but they're sending our black children away for years. Oh, yeah, they are. Oh, yeah, it doesn't matter. But half of them are saying, oh, you know what, this is why, and it was funny because I heard a judge say when it was Devontae Miller, 20-year-old, in 2016, there were two off-duty officers. They were brothers. Thuralt and his brother Christian were charged with aggravated assault and obstruction of justice in connection With the December 2016 incident in Whitby, Ontario, which is east of Toronto, prosecutors alleged during the trial that the brothers beat Miller, who was actually 19, not 20 at the time, with a metal pipe, leaving him with a ruptured eye and other injuries. A loss of eye. I don't know what ruptured. Rupture means loss. Okay, and it's on CBC. You'll see it. They alleged the pair feared for their lives. Two off-duty officers beat with a metal pipe a black man who lost his eye. And you know what they received? 9 months. And you know what the officer, one of the two brothers would let go, and the other one received 9 months. And the funny thing, terrible, but oddly enough, it's not funny, but it's almost laughable that he got 9 months and he was released on bail immediately. So what does that say? You tell me. You took a young man's eye. You're telling me you were fearing for your life. Two off-duty officers took a pipe and beat a black man till he lost his eye. A 19-year-old. Okay? That's what you did. And the judge has the nerve to say this is a reason why the black community does not trust the police. No, they don't trust the police because even when it goes to the judges, they're not equitable. They're not fair. They don't understand what they're doing. Clearly, they're in favor. I don't know if they're afraid of the police. Well, it's a tight union, I guess. It could be. I don't know. But unfortunately, for you to give somebody that takes somebody's eye, you beat two officers, not civilians, two police officers. Go at it and beat a young black man down and take his eye. Okay, they take his eye. And what the judge says is that the black community does not, you know what I mean? Does not trust the police force. And you wonder why. Okay, DeLuca said nothing short of a jail sentence would suffice in this case. He said the sentence takes into account Throughout's role as a police officer and the racialized context in which the assault happened. And you're telling me that nothing short of a jail sentence, 9 months, which we know the Canadian law is 2/3 you get out, and this guy was released on bail. Don't tell me about no. Once it's out of the public's eye, it's not even going to be a thought. And there's no amount of money that could take this and change it back to the way it was. There's no amount of money. Like that 9 months? Come on. You gotta be joking me. You gotta be. And this is why when judges make those comments, we gotta hang our heads. We gotta say, really? Really? There's no democracy. It's hypocrisy. It's a lie. It's terrible. And I'm wondering when there is going to be real change in this country. This country has lost its foothold around the world. People look at it and you know what? They say, oh, we're always last to respond in a lot of areas anyways when it comes to cooperating with other countries, unfortunately. But inside our own country, we have such issues that it's sad. And this recent Montreal police officer who put his knee on the neck and face of this young black man, you know, little Canadian news, but a couple politicians say, we're going to look into it. Really? You're going to look into it. You're going to look into it for about 5 minutes, but to me, because he didn't die, they're not really putting any emphasis. I guess they got to die. Black folks got to die with the knee on the neck. What do you think? You keep that practice up, eventually that's what we're going to have. But what's scary to me is that if you keep allowing this behavior, okay, to flourish, eventually it's going to lead to death. You can't put your knee on someone's neck and they're not going to die, just like George Floyd. So why would you even employ that? Like, we need a major overhaul. We need some major change. We can call for it, but I think we got to call it out as we see it. And we got to stop being in denial of what's really going on. So when I talk about these cases, I'm talking about the faces, the representation and lack thereof. And I need to get people to listen, to understand that there needs to be a call for some change and some real investigation. This SIU that we have in this country is a joke. It's a real joke. And there's no representation. Look at Parliament. The indigenous people, half of them that are there are talking about how they're being disrespected. So my concerns is that this is going on and no one's saying anything about it. I'm not even hearing any of the politicians really talking about any of these issues here in this country. They're not really talking about it. One just made mention that we might look into it. Yeah, whatever. Then the next day you don't hear anything about it. Shame. Terrible shame. Terrible shame. There's just so much change that needs to occur. So I just thought that when you think about these incidents and you look at the policing and the community policing and the lack thereof, it's set up to fail. It's a police state. It's turned into a police state, and it's not a police state for all races. It's not. It's a police state for certain races, black faces. That's the truth. That's what it is. It's oppression. Court system's corrupt too. It is. It's a business. So there's no real justice going on there. Shoot, if they don't get you one way, they'll lie to get you another way. Shoot, that's the way it is. People go, oh, you got such a negative attitude to what? It's a real attitude. You can't be talking to me unless you know the facts. I know the facts. I know young black women, young black men have a hard time in this country. And the reason why they have a hard time is because they're perceived in different ways and they're treated differently, and the lack of respect and the lack of real programming and the throwing the money at it where people don't really throw a little bit of money at it. And then when the government changes hands, and that money never really gets to those communities. Some of those vulnerable communities out there, what are some of them? Well, Jane and Weston, Jane and Finch, Humber, Regent. Well, Regent's a new region, which the people were squattered out of there into certain areas. But in the Queen and Parliament areas were a lot of issues that need assistance. Bathurst, Steeles area, all these areas could use some real representation and use some real community support and some real programs that are productive. All I see moving in this city is gentrification and condominiums, which are unaffordable for most. So they're pushing people out. I don't know where half of them are going, but they're being pushed out, but they're not being provided for. Did you hear me? They're being pushed out, but they're not being provided for. And that's the sad truth. It's called gentrification and elimination of our rights. And the truth is that these areas that could use real funding, real businesses, real support, don't get it because there's a system in place that's not meant to improve the system. It really isn't. I mean, you see young people on the rise when it comes to dropouts. You see the rise in incarceration rates. Do you understand? You see the lack of programs to assist those who have issues with maybe crime, or if it starts out with a certain crime, it stays there and escalates. And the problem is that these young people that are going in there are being mixed in with these adults who have serious criminal records. They don't have proper facilities anymore because they don't put their money to support. They don't want change. They want control, but they don't want change. And that's the issue. So the counselor is saying it's a wake-up call for a lot of people to realize that there is definitely some serious issues in these developed countries. It looks great from the outside, but when you dig a little deeper, you could see that the change is not really happening. And the George Floyd, I would like to say that went worldwide, but I can see by this lesson here in Montreal the police officer, and they're obviously their organization. The practice is, I guess, put the knee on the face. Doesn't really matter. We're going to control them and keep them down, and who cares what the ramifications are, because basically there are really no ramifications for us because we're in control. Um, just terrible. But this is the counselor, and I'm saying, please be like the wise old bird and spread the word and keep your mind open, all right, to what's really going on. Open your eyes and see what's really happening. And as much change that we think is occurring, there's a lot of stagnation that's happening in the nation. And there's really no progress. You know, think about it. It's just incarceration, bigger jails. We're emulating what's going on in the States as far as our criminal justice system. That's all we really ever done. That's where the bail program came from, right? Copied in the United States in the 70s. And look at us now, building super jails. Anyways, it's terrible, and the behavior in those prisons is ridiculous. But, anyways, I want you to be like the wise old bird, spread the word, and take care, people.